Good Shabbos. This week's portion is Parshas Chukas, and there's a story in this week's Parsha of the death of Miriam. And following her death, there seems to be a lack of water because, according to tradition, the well was traveling with the Jewish people from the time that Moshe hit the rock earlier on and supplied water, and that water stayed with the Jews, all in the merit of Miriam. And when Miriam died, the water stopped. The Jews, of course, complain like they usually do and say to Moshe, we're going to die here without any water. God instructs him very similarly to what he instructed him the first time when they complained and he hit the rock and the rock brought forth water. This time God also tells him, Kacha Samata, take your staff, gather the people, you and Aaron, your brother. But this time he says, V'dibartem el hasela. He says, speak to the rock leineim, in front of their eyes, and the Nasan Meimav, and it will give its water. And we know very famously what happens is that Moshe does not follow the command of God, and he takes his staff and he hits the rock, and the rock finally, after a couple of times, it seems, brings forth water. And God says, because you were not willing to sanctify my name in front of the Jewish people, therefore you and Aaron, your brother, will not be able to go into the land of Israel. Moshe and Aaron also, because he seems to have been part of this, were punished with not being able to go into the land of Israel because of what seems to be somewhat of what I would call a minor sin. Now, of course, we have this idea in the Talmud and in the writings of the rabbis that say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is medaktikim b'tzadikim k'chut hasara. God judges the righteous like with a hair's breadth. In other words, even a small sin is exaggerated and understood to be a larger sin from somebody who we expect more. But I think it's still problematic for this kind of sin. Not only was he not able to go in to lead the people, the Jewish people, to the land of Israel, but he wasn't even allowed to go in. Later on, it says, "V'aschan al Hashem," he pleaded with God, "Please let me go into the land." And he's not able to go in at all. This is the Moshe who performed all the miracles, led the Jews out of Egypt for 40 years in the desert. God could have let him just go in and let him die after he goes into the land, but he doesn't even let him pass into the land. It's also problematic, as I sort of hinted at, why is Aaron here punished with him? It says he went with Aaron, but Aaron didn't hit the rock. It was Moshe that hit the rock. But it does say that he was there when he did hit the rock. And he said to them, Shimun Hamarim, Moshe said before he hit the rock, listen, you rebels, I will be able to draw forth water from this rock. And I suppose it says in the verse beforehand that it was Moshe and Aaron who gathered the people when this was said. So he seems to be involved either in the act of hitting the rock or at least in the act of saying, listen, you rebels. And some commentators actually say that the major sin of Moshe was not so much hitting the rock, it's that he called them rebels, and really they weren't. They were complaining legitimately that they needed water, and God doesn't seem to have gotten angry. So why are you, Moshe, and Aaron following you getting angry? But again, it's problematic that Aaron seems to be only a tag-along with Moshe, and he's also punished. And then you have to ask a very, very simple question. Why was Moshe commanded the first time to hit the rock, and now he's commanded to only talk to the rock? And maybe a greater question is, if you're only told to talk to the rock, why does it say take your staff and speak to the rock? Take your staff? What for? If you're not going to use the staff to hit the rock. So I think there's a very simple answer to this. And it's a question of transitioning leaders. And there's also a question of leaders not being able to transition themselves and understand that we have to go from one form of leadership to another form of leadership. And it's not even so much a fault of the leader. It's the natural tendency for a person to lead in a certain way, to act in a certain way, even to think in a certain way. And I think that might be the answer here. Moshe was a leader who performed miracles. He was the one who performed all of the plagues. He's the one who split the sea. He's the one who led the Jews through the desert and lived miraculously for 40 years with no nothing to support them except the the manna from the heaven, and the water from the well. And he thought in terms of miracles, and he thought in terms of a leadership which calls for clear acts and great acts of war, of miracles, a showman almost. And God had told him that perform these miracles, and then the Jews, they will trust you, they will believe in you, they will accept you as a leader when they see you perform these miracles. That was what Moshe was instructed to do. That's how he lived his life, that's how he led, and that's how he understood what leadership was all about. Now it comes a time that the Jews are ready to go into the land. And perhaps the message here is, yes, kachas amata, take the staff that you performed all these miracles, and show the people that no longer will you be just performing miracles. That's not the way we lead our life. That's the way perhaps you instruct a young nation, just like you instruct children. In the beginning, you tell them, don't worry, we'll take care of you. You don't give them a complicated approach to life. Life is black and white. God will provide. And God will provide for, in this case, through the performance of miracles. But what happens as you're going into the land, you have to say no. Now we have to transition to a different leadership. We have to be able to say, we're no longer going to hit the rock, we're going to speak to the rock. And speaking to the rock is also a problem. What does that mean? You speak to a rock. Talking to a rock shouldn't really do anything. But perhaps it means in front of the rock, you pray to God. And prayer is a whole different form of relating to God. When you pray to God, you could pray for a miracle just like Moshe performed miracles before. But the way we live our life is we pray to God, and then we act and we do what we're supposed to do. And we say that God should help us. There should be a siyata d'shmaya. God should help us. We go out, we earn a living, we work, we struggle, and we ask God to make sure that we're successful. At the end, when we're successful, it's always hard to know whether that was an act of God or was our own act. We assume that God is helping us, and He's leading us, and He's giving us the ability to be successful. But ultimately, we have to act on our own, and we no longer need these miraculous performance of hitting rocks and letting water spring forth like a magician. No, we pray to God and we ask it to help. And of course, here when we pray to God, there's still going to be a miracle, but that's what a transition is. We're moving from one form of our relationship to God, almost a child's relationship to their parents, to an authority figure, to one which we take responsibility for ourselves. And therefore, that's perhaps why Aaron is also sort of dragged along. He doesn't seem to be the main culprit here. And some commentators say really he was punished for the golden calf, the fact that he was involved in the golden calf. But I think it might be simple that Moshe and Aaron are a team, and they're seen as a team. And there's a time where the people need a different leader. So it's not only the leader which has trouble transitioning, the people are going to see Moshe and Aaron that way. Even if Moshe and Aaron did act in a different way than they did before, when they come into the land, they're going to look at Moshe and say, hey, we're in trouble. We need some miracles. So we have to say, okay, that's it. Moshe no longer could even go into the land of Israel. That time has passed. And I think it's a simple lesson for us also. We see this all the time. Great political leaders, at a certain point, they no longer, not that they're not worthy anymore, but they don't fit the job anymore. They don't fit the job description for a new generation. And sometimes new generations need different form of leadership. And, we all like to think that, the past was so great and we had strong leaders and we knew what to do and people were more moral. I tend to think that that's not necessarily true. I think we go through different stages in history, and different types of leaders are necessary, and the people are different, and people have to act in a different way. So the way we're acting today might not be consistent with the way we acted 30, 40, 50, or 100 years ago, but it might be appropriate for our times. And that's how history moves forward. And God makes sure that happens. God removes the Moshe and the Aaron